We're talking about the top PKI metrics that you all should care about. Why should you care about expiration status? Well, without proper visibility into every key and certificate you have, you don't know when they're actually going to expire. And worse, if you don't know who to notify before that happens, you have these risk of network outages that keep arising as more identities are actually pushed out across your business. As more and more of these identities come online and using cryptography for it, you got to make sure to eliminate those costly outages and knowing exactly where the expiration status of these are.
So this report is showing you a nice overview of when certificates are about to expire. So it's going to help you prioritize which ones you need to take action on. But also it gives you a chance to plan for the ones that are going to take more time. Perhaps you do have a cert out there and you don't know who's in charge of it, or you don't know how to replace it on that application that's using it. So that gives you some time to do your research. We do see the expiration of certificates being a leading cause of people starting to even investigate doing certificate lifecycle management. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's an outage that brings the importance of certificates to the front of executives' minds.
The reality is that algorithms are evolving with all these advances in computing, right? So as they do, you got to make sure you're able to adapt quickly without any minimal disruption in your existing apps and infrastructure. So if you think about it, if you don't know what signatures and key sizes are strong or weak, wherever they are, you're very vulnerable to being open to an attack that you may not be ready to defend.
This report, as well as the one that we're going to see next with the signing algorithms, is really, really useful in one, before you even start figuring out how strong your security is. It gives you an overview to let you see where you may have vulnerabilities. So is the issue that your key strength is too low, or is it that you have a weak signing algorithm? Also, seeing where you have super weak keys, like you see MDX there, that could be an indication that you may have something out there that is so old it may not even be getting used anymore because a lot of applications simply refuse those certificates.
Yeah, the crypto agility story really plays a big role in specifically this key size and key strength, and also these signing algorithms that we're talking about next. So signing algorithms, right? They're the foundation of trust and security for your PKI. Similar to key size and key strength, it's essential that you track these signing algorithms and prepare for migration if, more accurately, if the algorithm is actually going to be deprecated.
This report is also valuable not just for your PKI admins, but for your application owners to kind of shine a spotlight on. You need to be sure that your security is getting updated and your application can handle the latest and greatest.
All right, number 4. This is probably one of my favorite ones, the Certificate Authority, or CA issuance. You may be deploying and in charge of 3 to 4, maybe even public CAs that you're integrating with across your entire company. And you're also dealing with an internal issuing CA, right? So one of the things that you want to make sure is that if you have all of these CAs at play, you need an overview of all the activity that's happening at any given time. It's very, very important you do this because you can figure out basically where to detect any weird or ominous or hidden activity that's going on. So an example is if you have a misconfigured GPO, if you're issuing all these certs that it shouldn't actually be doing. I think, Sami, you had an example of that at one of our customers. Had something similar to this happen.
Yeah, it was a customer that we were doing a POC with. And they thought that they had, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 certificates out there. And when we did our inventory scan, we found something like 200,000 certificates, which was sort of mind-boggling to them. And that led us to investigate the certificates and see what was going on. And it turned out that there was a server in the environment that was rebooting every 6 hours. And whenever it rebooted, it requested a certificate. And it had been doing this for something like 2 years. No one had noticed. If they had this report, they would have had much more insight into, hey, there's something going on here that's asking for certificates, and I don't know what it is. And in this case, it was just a server that was kind of being a little weird, but it could have been an indication of something malicious happening. So it's very important to pay attention to what's happening on your CAs because they are, providing a digital identity to devices and people in your organization.
All right, certificate requesters and owners. It's kind of like saying, hey, you get a cert, and you get a cert, and you get a cert, and you get a cert. It's like, oh, you want something? Here you go, here you go, here you go. And so it gets out of hand really, really fast, right? The thing is, when that all happens, you need to know where are these things? Who's the requester and who's the owner? Because when there's a certificate expiration or operational downtime, the first question that's usually asked is who owns that certificate? So without knowing who that certificate owner is, the business basically keeps having that downtime until somebody knows where to go and renew the certificate that's been expired. You can see a bunch of details that we've laid out kind of in this area, so you can actually know who exactly, where it is, who do I notify, and who do I go to figure out how to renew the cert.
Yeah, and the ownership of certificates is super important because when outages happen, it's because a certificate wasn't being paid attention to by someone or some process wasn't configured in order to pay attention to that certificate. And it only takes one certificate to cause an outage, such as the Microsoft Teams outage that happened shortly after lockdown. It was just one certificate that had expired.
Self-signed certificate. Here's what happens usually a lot of times is that you have DevOps, it's going crazy. You have this rapid increase of all these self-signed certs that are out there by your engineering team. So while you're deploying really fast, a self-signed certificate is one that really is neither public nor private. It's basically an onboard CA that's attached to a certain tool. What's really interesting is that we want to make sure, by interesting, I mean, people come to us, they ask us, hey, how can you tie into HashiCorp Vault? Or how can you tie into a CA on my Istio service mesh, right? What they're trying to figure out is basically, how can we make sure that these secrets managers are policy compliant, getting back to an enterprise PKI? So this one can get out of hand really fast, but it's a great way to kind of show exactly where the certs are by tying into these tools that you may not have known where they were actually being issued by the engineering team.
This report will let you see who is kind of going around your policies and allow you to understand why they are by asking them. Obviously, the report's not going to say why they are, but then you can look at how do you improve your processes to make it easier for like your DevOps teams to still get certificates, get them securely and within your policy, but not slow them down.
All right, next one, wildcard certs. It's a cert that's used in multiple subdomains that's attached to one certificate. This is an example. Recently, this happened with Spotify. If you all were listening to music at one point this year and all of a sudden Spotify went out, it was basically mapped back to a TLS certificate that they forgot to renew. And it was a wildcard cert that actually affected all these other areas of the business. So this report, what's great is that wildcard certs are great in the terms that they actually provide a lot of cost savings. But if you do not know where this cert is and there's a single point of failure with the cert, it's going to affect multiple areas. It's not going to just affect one endpoint. It's going to affect everything that is attached to, because you have that one cert that's affecting all these different subdomains.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember being on a project where the wildcard cert was expiring, but we did not know exactly every application that was consuming that cert. So the way that we were tasked with finding that, what we had to do was do SSL TLS scanning across the whole network to see where we could find that wildcard cert being presented by the applications that were served up by the organization. It was a very big lesson in how a wildcard cert can be a single point of failure. Had we not known that certificate was about to expire, something like 24 applications would have gone down on Christmas Eve.
One of the things that this report does in a wildcard cert, you have this little star thing. And since that's in our database, we can actually go and find and pull back all the different values that have that associated with it. Number 8 is automated versus manual certificates. So we know that a lot of times when it comes to automated, it's about automated deployment and automated renewal of what goes on in your environment, right? You don't want to be manually updating and manually renewing a lot of these certificates that are out there. So there's a way to actually pull in and see all the different automated and manual certificates you have. I then figure out a way to go and actually figure out which ones that you want to automate. And we actually have a certificate management maturity model that walks through the risk exposure that you have, the more manual you are versus the more automated you are. So high automation relates to more dynamic approach to your overall PKI operations and certificate management practices. And the lower the automation is, the higher risk of exposure that you actually have. This maturity model kind of details all the questions you should be asking, all the things that should be in there, so you can understand properly how do you get from that manual state all the way to this dynamic state that you have.
Certificate revocation list. So this is probably the crux of your PKI management. What the certificate revocation list or CRL lets you do is, as a consumer of a certificate, I need to be able to ask the CA, hey, is this certificate still valid? Like, are you still cool with me using this to confirm the identity of where I'm going or who I'm talking to? Let's say I left an organization and people didn't, Keyfactor didn't want me to be associated based on my, email encryption certificate anymore. They would revoke that certificate. The CRL would then be published to say, hey, this certificate for Sami is no bueno anymore. It's been revoked. And so then people would know not to trust that certificate. The CRL is served up in a public place where anyone can, go to an HTTP site, check the CRL. Okay, good to go, not good to go. If for some reason I can't reach that site where the CRL is being presented, then I'm just not going to trust that certificate. So if the CRL is expired or unavailable, then every certificate issued from that CA is going to be considered untrustworthy.
Yeah, and the thing too is like these certs, they can be revoked for all kinds of reasons. If you had like a key or a CA compromise, if the certificate is no longer needed, or you have one that's superseded. So it, like what you're saying, it's very important to kind of know and have this in place. At Keyfactor, I like to say that what's worse than not managing a known certificate is actually not managing an unknown one. And we are all about talking about how there's no second class citizens when it comes to all certificates. We think you should have every certificate under managed in your organization, and getting a inventory of that is something you need to do. And so I know, Sami, this is kind of a report after a scan has actually been complete, and so then go ahead and put them in inventory. But talk about some of the ways that we can actually scan and pull in that inventory that's going to be continuous.
If the certificate is one that is coming from a CA that you're going to be able to know about that by doing an inventory of the CA and that database. SSL TLS scanning as well. Go to every endpoint, and you want to scan your environment for all the ports that you have open that could be hosting certificates. Bring that certificate information into the database too. You may want to look for things like maybe a misspelling in your company name is on a certificate or the domain name is on a certificate that you've discovered through this. And that could be an indication of something malicious going on.